But where is security? Security comes as an afterthought. And this is a big problem. This would actually create severe impacts, not only in the revenue, but also in the brand and the trust in the company.
The goal here is to build a successful business. And any business, as much as being a technologist, would love to believe that technology is the solution for everything. There are three pillars: people, process, and technology.
Every one of our customers, they practice DevSecOps in the context of these modern workloads of Kubernetes, containers, and microservices. But I have never, ever once heard them use that word, DevSecOps.
The cloud is great. It solves a lot of real-world problems, but it's not just one cloud anymore. Public clouds, private clouds, edge clouds. The average business uses 5 different cloud providers. It's become chaotic and complex, with unpredictable costs, inconsistent security, multiple management tools, and different formats for workloads that span cloud platforms and providers. But it doesn't have to be that way. The Dell Technologies Cloud, powered by VMware, can be the one constant across your clouds. It brings consistent infrastructure and operations to your multi-cloud environment, so you can choose the right cloud for each application. A public cloud that lets you easily tap into services, a private cloud that's fully under your control, or the edge with cloud as a service. With a true hybrid cloud experience, your business becomes more agile with simple workload migration and easy onboarding for new assets. Your teams get to market faster. With simplified operations and automated processes, you reduce risk and strengthen your security profile. And with Dell Technologies Cloud, you have flexible consumption options, reducing your total cost of ownership. Like it or not, the business world often requires many clouds. Now, that's easier than ever, with consistent infrastructure, operations, and services across all your clouds. You get the cloud without the chaos. The Dell Technologies Cloud.
Hello. Thank you. Welcome everyone to this Python session on DevSecOps. My name is Abid Gar, and in this session, we will explore issues and challenges with secure software development lifecycle. While the goal of DevOps is to deliver applications and services in a more agile and automated way, enabled by closer collaboration between development and operations, DevSecOps aims to integrate security into the entire workflow. Unlike traditional waterfall methodology, in which security teams are tasked with testing the code towards the end of the development before production, DevSecOps calls for building security into the end-to-end software lifecycle. This requires a fresh approach to software development practices, the tools, and also the IT culture, in addition to securing the applications in production. However, incorporating secure coding practices, vulnerability assessment and management, and testing into the flow poses many challenges that are both technical as well as non-technical in nature. In this session, we will discover that there are cultural changes needed for incorporating DevSecOps, security and governance in a fast-paced environment where changes are needed for incorporating DevSecOps, and the software software changes are made daily basis, has its own set of issues, and new considerations emerge with evolving software development architectures such as containers and microservices. And integrating testing tools into the CI/CD pipeline is not so straightforward. Today, we are extremely fortunate to have the CEOs of 2 security software companies, a DevSecOps practitioner, and a recognized expert in cyber and cloud security share their perspectives, key lessons learned, and the best practices for DevSecOps adoption. With that, I'd like to invite each one of them to introduce themselves. starting with Jyoti from Fidelity Investments. Jyoti?
Thank you so much, Abhi. Welcome, speakers and wonderful guests. I hope we have a wonderful time here. I am Jyoti Charyulu, and I'm the product manager. I direct the enterprise application security programs, and I've been blessed to start and implement and scale up large-scale enterprise application security programs and SSDLC programs at several companies. I'm excited to be a part of this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Nikhil Gupta. I'm founder and CEO of Armor Code, a stealth mode startup. Software is eating the world, and we believe there has to be better and simple ways to secure the software at the speed of development. Prior to Armor Code, I was founder and CEO of Avid Secure, where we built AI-powered multi-cloud security and compliance platform. The company was acquired by Sophos last year. And prior to that, I have 20 plus years of experience building and selling products for enterprises. I'm very passionate about software security and looking forward to the panel with my esteemed colleagues.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Valmiki Mukherjee, the chairman and founder of Cyber Future Foundation. We're a nonprofit leadership volunteer platform of executives, leaders, and thinkers who are committed to building trust in cyberspace. It's great to see cyber as a topic of focus and TICON. This is entrepreneurial gathering, so I believe that the organizers and specifically the track leaders have done a great job to pull this in together. And I'm thankful to the organizers to have me here, especially the good friends that I've worked with for several years now. My day job is leading critical infrastructure security practice within EY, and my focus is around energy sector, where I've spent quite a bit of time and across different sectors. And in my roles, I've worked with many leaders and had the good fortune to work with many entrepreneurs, such as you in the audience and members of C-suite, to understand, appreciate, and invest in security and resiliency of their businesses, of their digital assets. And I've come across both challenges and opportunities for having strong product security practices. And in this session, I will focus on learnings and hope to share what entrepreneurs shaping this digital innovation and investors funding those ventures and buyers who are looking to stay up to date with innovation can take away in terms of strategies that will make a meaningful impact on their business. So glad to be here.
Hi, greetings everyone. My name is Ratan Tipeneni. I'm CEO of Tigera. Tigera, we are leaders in Kubernetes networking, network security. We power over 1 million nodes in 166 countries. We power over 200,000 Kubernetes clusters across the planet. All the major public cloud providers have picked our software to embed inside their own managed Kubernetes service, and all the major Kubernetes distros have also done the same. And what I want to try and do today over the next few minutes is to give you, share some practical lessons learned from the front lines. Our customers tend to be fairly large companies that have made multi-million-dollar investments in Kubernetes, standardized on that. So sampling our JPMC, Morgan Stanley, Visa, Discover, Ford, and I'll bring in some lessons learned from them. So two notable companies I'll just talk about very briefly. JPMC is a very big Kubernetes footprint. They've standardized across all the 4 clouds they work on. Same thing with AT&T. Their 5G plane is built on Kubernetes, and we power that. So hope to share some of those lessons learned with you. Abhi, back to you. Abhi, you're on mute.
Thank you, everybody, for your introductions.
As the world reopens, ServiceNow is helping customers make sure going back to the workplace works for everyone. Introducing the Safe Workplace apps and dashboard. 4 apps specifically designed to help ensure the health and safety of your workforce and workplace, all housed in a single dashboard to give you a comprehensive look into everything you need to know. And they're available now, out of the box, powered by the Now platform. Get a bird's eye view to make sure your employees are prepared and ready to go back to the workplace. Manage inventory levels across your organisation thanks to workflows that automatically replenish supplies. Screen and verify the health of your employees and help manage workflows for cleaning, sanitation and safe distancing for employees. 4 essential apps, 1 comprehensive dashboard. Together we can make sure going back to the workplace can work for everyone. That's the power of the Now platform.
And maybe I'll start with you, Jyoti. If you can share with us a little bit about how do you solve some of the main challenges that are associated with DevSecOps and basically integrating security into the software development lifecycle?
Thank you, Avi. Yes, absolutely. I think the biggest challenge that we face here is how do you align speed to market in a competitive landscape and security services? So when you see DevSecOps, development is pretty much sometimes done in siloed teams, working on an artifact off of a backlog and throw it over to the ops team that pushes to production. In the last decade or so, we have seen really great, spectacular results coming from DevOps, where you've seen automation, CI/CD automation, trunk-based deployment, deployment of test cases, etc. But where is security? Security comes as an afterthought. And this is a big problem. This would actually create severe impacts, not only in the revenue, but also in the brand and the trust in the company. But if you take the opposite case, if you have an effective DevSecOps program, that would actually enable new opportunities for you. It will give you a competitive edge. So it's really important why we need to have an effective DevSecOps program. But then how do you do that? We are going to talk about four foundational components in this talk today, and of course open up for QA. The first one is a very well thought out strategy. I think that is the key for a successful, effective DevSecOps program. What is your strategic roadmap? The second one is a robust secure software development lifecycle program, which is an SSDLC. So that's the second piece. Third is empowered teams. And then the fourth foundational aspect is governance. So let's talk about the first strategic roadmap. So what is your vision when you come out and say, I want to have an effective security program? Did you know 26-year-old Michelangelo, he was given a huge piece of rock, which was abandoned by two other sculptors. But he didn't see the rock. He saw his completed David, that whole sculpture inside the rock, before even he touched his chisel and hammer. That's what we need to do. Before we start and jump, let's stop back and really envision what is it we would like for this program to be. So I have a few strategic tips, and it's not my way or the way or just the only way. It's because DevOps is different, right? So that's the first important aspect. You have to know your scope. You have to know your boundary, because DevSecOps is different for different companies. There are different goals, different resources, different risk appetites. So what is your scope, the boundary that you are trying to protect? And then another tip would be to, once you get that, to really build a risk-based framework. So you risk rank your applications, tier 0, tier 1, what is really important from your perspective for your organization, right? And based on that risk-based ranking or risk-based framework comes out your policy compliance framework. So that's again a strategy that you would build right on. When you think of DevSecOps, it's basically how do you automate security at every checkpoint from the left to the right, from ideation to implementation. And then you would look at, so what are the tools that you would need for this automation, right? So you have, or would you like to have a statistic analysis tool, a SAST, or a dynamic analysis, DAST, or runtime, penetration testing? So those are again key aspects that you would look and consider when you're building out your security program. What does your web application firewall landscape look like? But another key strategy would be to add all these and shift left. And I know it sounds cool, shift left, but what does it mean, right? So let's take your manual penetration testing. Do you see a pattern there? Do you see your critical and high flaws? Is it a cross-site scripting flaw? Look at your web application firewall logs. How many distinct IPs have tried to attack? Are they using cross-site scripting? Look at your SAST and DAST and use this and customize it to build left right? Build an awareness program, a training program at the development level. And again, that's key because it takes 100 times less money and effort to fix a flaw in development than in production. So the key is always to make sure that the development teams make it easy. Security, if it becomes an afterthought, it'll not be done. It has to be automated within this. So when the developer is building his code or her code, she gets training of how a cross-site scripting flaw is affecting a pen test result or a web application firewall. That developer is more inspired. And when that developer gets training at the development side, it becomes more automated. So that's a strategy that you would keep in. So for a development team, you would use your Jenkins build server, right? You just build your code, but you could have an API that takes that code into a SaaS tool, runs it based on the compliance policy you've written, based on your risk landscape, and then it's an iterative process that would help identify how would you fix flaws at a rate very fast at left of your pipeline. And this is how the teams really get empowered, where you have tools that are identified. You have a lot of freeware tools as well, like OWASP, ZAP, dependency checker for the open source flaws, like you have software composition analysis. All of that could be integrated with your pipeline and done left of the pipeline. So that's how you empower teams. I think that's an important aspect by itself, that how do people come into this place, right? It's just never just a strategy, because a vision without action remains a vision. You need an action without a vision is a nightmare. So Nikhil, do you have suggestions on how to make the vision a reality versus keeping it just a vision?
No, thanks, Jyoti, for sharing the insight and giving a good perspective. And it's always important to start with a strategy, right? Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned that, at the end of the day, the goal here is to build a successful business. And any business, as much as being a technologist, would love to believe that technology is the solution for everything. There are three pillars: people, process, and technology. And technology is just the 1/3 aspect, as you mentioned about SaaS, DAST, and other tools. Now, looking at DevSecOps, like how it evolved from DevOps to being DevSecOps. By just looking at the name itself, it is at the intersection of a developer, security, and operations, which are three separate organizations or silos in a large organization. And the incentive for all three are separate. Developers are incentivized by moving fast, by delivering the code. That's their KPIs. However, for the security team, their KPI is to make it secure and have no stone unturned. And at the end of the day, that makes it more slow. And for the operations team, their goal is to keep the lights bulb on. So if you look at it, there are all three, and you have to, that's why, understand and ensure that there's a big cooperation and collaboration between the people aspect. As you mentioned, Jyoti, there are plethora of tools which are there, like SaaS, DAS, RASP, and all those tools. Now, all these tools generates a lot of alerts, and several of them are false positives. Now, from security perspective, you have to capture it all, right? Even though there are a lot of false positives, but from audit perspective, you have to ensure. And when you are running these tools, you will receive several thousands of findings or defects every week. Now, from the engineering perspective, they are incentivized to build the codes faster and work on the revenue generating features. So out of those security defects, only few which are critical, those are the ones that developer needs to focus on. And so that's where there is a constant tussle between the security and the engineering organization, which issues needs to be fixed, how they need to be prioritized, how do we need to do risk ranking. And today, the processes that are laid out there is people will put this information into Excel tools. There will be tons of emails going back and forth. People will create JIRAs in several organizations. There will be two separate JIRAs, one for development, one for security, because development doesn't want several thousands of issues into their JIRA system because they basically breaks their KPIs, whereas security wants everything in their JIRA tickets over there. So now, as you mentioned, in order to execute that strategy, there has to be a good collaboration between all these organizations. And whenever we are talking about building a program at scale, like what you built, Jyoti, at current and previous jobs, you always want to ensure that there's a right governance practices around that. And this is a good time. How about Val? Why don't you share your experiences that how do we build governance around these programs? You're on mute here, Val.
I've always chosen to surround myself by great people who are very forward-thinking when it comes to gender issues and diversity. I think diversity is a key and central element of any environment, and I've never been in an environment where diversity doesn't lead to a better place. From a science perspective, we know that if you have greater diversity of microbes, for example, in your gut, that you're more likely to be healthy. And that's finding of diversity of microbes in your gut. If you think about the diversity of people in a working environment, it leads to a healthier environment and more innovation.
Thank you, Nikhil and Jyoti. Great start to this discussion. I really like the grand groundwork you have built. In terms of technologists and entrepreneurs who are listening in today, I believe it's extremely important for us to realize that cybersecurity is typically seen as a technical matter until it is not, right? The board and the C-suite, which are going to fund and support your of this endeavors, specifically the DevSecOps endeavor within application security programs, they have to understand and appreciate the level of investment and the level of effort that is required. So it's extremely important while we present a really very well thought out strategy at the outset, so that we have the right level of stakeholders at every level built into this program, right? So as Jyoti mentioned, organizational context is extremely important. It's extremely important who you are building this program for, while the underlying foundation of the technological principles and the products may be the same. I mean, you may have, as there's probably the mention about the different technology components were inserted. You have to think about the type of business and the services, and what kind of data and the business processes do they actually provide to their end customers and end users. The other component that is extremely important while considering strategies for selling your program to the C-suite and the leadership is what kind of engineering practices they already have, and the culture and the mindset is extremely important, because as much as you think this is a technological advancement, which it is, it's extremely important also to think that the amount of cultural change the applications team has to, or the development team has to go through, and how closely the business would have to work with to make it happen. And as Nikhil mentioned, that the program charter and mission with respect to that, it's integration of three different functions. It's the traditional development function, is the security operations functions, and the infrastructure operations functions coming together, right? So the integration of these three supporting functions need a very holistic program to be developed. And two things that I think are extremely important in terms of program is change management and communication management. Because you'd go through so much change, especially for larger organizations. I think it's more true than those that are starting more nimble. Entrepreneurs, when you're building this platform, have to ensure that you have the right set of documentation and communication and change management that comes packaged in with that service. That would make, I believe, Jyoti, as she's rolling out the program within our organization, much easier, and also it makes it even more attractive to the C-suite to sign up for this kind of program. Another angle that we really need to think about is the business that who are you serving for application basis, especially for larger organizations where entrepreneurs, I believe you have a lot of interest in. Understand if it's external customer facing, or our partners and suppliers facing, or it is internal customer facing. These are three different constituents, have different types of expectation. If you have a high profile external customer facing application, and that would come up first, and then probably that's where most of the resources are going to be spent. The other part is engineering and environment. Large scale legacy environments would need a very hybrid model. You cannot just switch and flip the switch and make it happen. And when it comes to put it together, the overall implementation, governance, and oversight, don't think about this as just one steering committee just running the program, but actually it's not just implementing the program, but rolling out is important. This will go through a continuous improvement cycle for over several years, hopefully, and the financial implications, the long term and the short term, the capex versus opex that is required to make this happen is extremely important. And finally, when you put together this package and think about putting a strategy together for your program, think about the timeline implications, and because there has to be a roadmap to get and achieve those goals. So putting all this together, you can probably think about the all-encompassing impact that it can have on the business and be able to make the best out of the DevSecOps investments that you can think of. Well, with that, I turn it over to them to share about the technology aspects of this journey.
Thanks, Will. So as Jyoti mentioned, there are a bunch of tools and application technologies which have been existing, like SaaS, DAST and all, and this has been there for over 20 plus years. However, what we have to also understand that how the development lifecycle has changed. Like 20 plus years ago, when I was at Bell Labs, we will have a 9-month development lifecycle, and there will be 3 months of security testing. So it took 1 year because we only had one release per year. However, the way the agile development has happened, and now the releases are more on a daily or a weekly or a worst case monthly basis. Now the same technologies and the tools are no longer applicable here. And as we don't have the luxury of having 3 months for the application security testing. Now, let's say the release has to happen every day, then you have to ensure that the security is automated, as Jyoti mentioned earlier. And apart from that, it's not humanly possible for the security team to ensure and run these tools manually. And the way the industry is evolving is that the security is becoming more and more of a governing function, where they define the best practices. These are the rules and these are the guardrails. And security is becoming everybody's responsibility and not just the security team. And you have to integrate all these things into the CI/CD, and there needs to be a better automation between the various tools, because as you know, there's a SaaS, DAS, RAS, whole bunch of tools are there. And also, since there are multiple organizations, which is security, development, and operation, there needs to be better collaboration. So because of this, I'll hand it back to Val again to share his viewpoint on how do we put these things in the newer world in the governance and strategy.
Well, I think one highlight that we want to make here is about metrics. What you cannot measure and you cannot manage. So leaning on Peter Drucker's famous saying, I think it's extremely important to understand what metrics are you going to present. As I mentioned about the strategy and the governance and the roadmap to actually implement this. The success of this program is going to be, what you present to the stakeholders, and then they should tell themselves. Well, again, in general, traditionally, we have seen this primarily as technical metrics, right? Which I think over time we've learned that doesn't work just by themselves. So you have to actually look at 3 different layers of metrics. One is the technical metrics that relates to the application, the security management functions, number of defects found through threat modeling, SAST and DAST, and each of these components that are part of this DevSecOps journey or program. They have to think about the operational metrics, that relates to program management. And that's extremely essential because, ultimately it turns out to how it is the return on investment that the business is making on these processes. And I think it's extremely important for us to share that. And then finally, you need to understand and probably present the executive metrics in terms of business goals and objectives, priorities, and organizational context, because that's what the true North Star of any program is. And this investment will probably realize its best value when you're able to, get all the stakeholders along with you, presenting to them the return on their investment. Metrics need to be very much contextualized. It can be, good or bad trends. A same number can represent 2 different directions. One could be that, say for example, you have a lot of defects coming up and showing that it could mean that you are in a ramp up in a development cycle. It's actually a good thing. You're finding fast, right? But if you're in a general cycle, if you're finding a lot of bugs or a lot of flaws and defects, and there is not a lot of new development going on, that means your tools are probably working and churning out the right defects. In the worst case scenario, it might mean the people are not really paying attention, and the same defects are coming back and forth. So it needs to have these specific metrics aligned and to understand and contextualize trends. But in terms of application scope, and then the few things that I would leave you with is that applications covered by security programs, you need to get an inventory of those applications and then work very closely with the governing body to understand where they want to invest most, because you cannot get to all of this together. It takes time to get to the far corners of this of the organization. Then time needed to resolve vulnerabilities. This is critical, especially when you're dealing with internet-facing web applications, which may be serving customers. And also measures how development teams understand their underlying security principles. So that's a good indicator. Flaw creation rate is extremely important, right? Security flaw creation rate is at different stages of business transformation associated with different development cycles are different. Ideally, the fix rate should be better, higher than the new found rate. And if the other way around, then you have a problem. And then tracking them over critical, high, and medium will probably keep you sane, because you can get to all of them together. And then the number of automated tests that you can perform is another effectiveness test, where you can say, that we have been able to drill down some of this good processes into automation. And then, the things that I think you should not focus on is there are a lot of distractors here. And I'm sure you have all gone through the championship rounds of who would be your DevSecOps champion. But specifically in this case, you will see that you have to focus on those that are the governing principles and the priorities as set by the governing body, and that will keep you in the right direction. Okay. So back to you, Ratan. Take it forward for your concepts around the technology itself.
Fantastic. So let me try and build on what Jyoti, Nikhil, and Val have talked about, and in the context of more modern workloads. Let me just take a minute to define modern workloads. So most of you are probably already familiar with it, but just to level set, we have enterprises now using microservices, containers, and they're using Kubernetes as an orchestration engine. That's a little bit of a mouthful, so in plain English, they're leveraging something to spin up and spin down these containers dynamically and to scale them. And most of this infrastructure they work on tends to be very dynamic. The Kubernetes itself is a declarative model, very similar to software. You declare what you want, it takes care of spinning this infrastructure up and down. So what I want to try to do is reflecting on to this panel, and I thought I'd try and share some practical lessons learned. We're pretty fortunate to work with some leading edge technology companies around the world. So 3 things I want to share in terms of lessons learned. The first thing is actually counterintuitive. I was preparing for this panel and reflect, hey, Abhi, can you put yourself on mute? You're hearing some feedback. Reflecting on this a little bit, in terms of what I could share in terms of the lessons learned. The first one is actually an incredibly counterintuitive lesson, which is that every one of our customers, they practice DevSecOps in the context of these modern workloads of Kubernetes, containers, and microservices, but I have never, ever once heard them use that word DevSecOps, which kind of, when you think about it, is counterintuitive. And I was saying, why is that? Why is it they don't use the word DevSecOps while every one of them is practicing it? And really it came down to a little bit more of an attitudinal and philosophical approach they all use. And it came down to 3 things. The first thing is they treat everything in the stack, networking, security, storage as code, no different from software. So first of all, they approach it from that perspective. The second is they mirror the philosophy of Kubernetes, which is about being a declarative model. So they apply the philosophy of the declarative model to networking, to security, to storage. And the third thing, everything they do, they think in terms of automation from the ground up. Without automation, they just will not build it, right, across the entire stack. So those are three things. And if you get the foundation of that right, DevSecOps actually have noticed, listening to our customers, it actually becomes a non-event where you don't even need to use a strange word like DevSecOps. Even listening to the word feels a little artificial. And integration into the CI/CD pipeline, the upstream, those are all natural consequences of this philosophical approach. So that I thought, even for me, although I live this every day, it was a little bit of a revelation. It was pretty jarring that they never use the word. Why is that, right? So that's the first thing I want to share with you. The second thing is, while we have an incredible group of engineers, we're very, very proud of our software. We get rave reviews about that. But I would argue that one of the single most important thing we do for our customers is at the beginning of the deployment, we actually run a Kubernetes security workshop. And we do something blindingly simple, actually, which is we bring about 6 teams together inside a room. We bring the app team, the platform team, the networking team, the security team, the DevOps, and the compliance team. We get them into a room. Believe it or not, this actually is probably the first time they've actually been in a meeting together, right? That's probably very hard to conceive, but sometimes we introduce them to each other and we bring them into a room. And that, I'd say, is one of the most pivotal things we do to set our customers up for success. And in the absence of that, there is nothing from a technology or tools or anything else that really matters. And this echoes a little bit of what Jyoti, Nikhil, and Val already talked about, that it's always, it comes down to the people. And if I were to give you another level of detail or double click on that, it's to bring these 6 functional areas together into a single room and have them work from a common reference point is probably the single most important thing you do upstream, because anything you do downstream after that, honestly, is a lower bit, it really doesn't matter. So that's probably the second lesson I'd share with you. The third lesson is, when we bring them into this room together, we get them to think about it through a common framework. And the framework that we use, what we put at the center of the solar system really is the application. Because if you get everyone to look at the problem through the lens of an application, trust me, the perspective changes very dramatically. And this may be fairly obvious when I say it in hindsight, but trust me when I say the security team or the networking team, the platform team, they rarely ever think about an application. But if you frame the problem as you're there to serve the application, the perspective changes dramatically. And then we help them design things like the label taxonomy for the applications. And we use that framework to help align all the 6 teams together. And that then serves as an incredibly strong foundation for them to actually implement DevSecOps, which then tends to be a non-event and a non-word for them. All that is really a consequence of doing these 3 things correctly. So if I were to just summarize, the first thing really critical is treat everything as code, everything in the stack, networking, security, storage. You cannot isolate it. Otherwise, you can't drive these things downstream. Second is think of it as a declarative model and use automation. And the second bucket is think about bringing the cross-functional teams together, these 6 teams I talked about, upstream at the design point together into a room to have a common framework. And the third part is put the application at the center of the universe and design around that. If you do those 3 things effectively, whether it's a modern application workloads like Kubernetes and containers or traditional, hopefully we can eliminate the word DevSecOps from our lexicon. I'll be back to you.
Thank you, Ratan. I think that was a good, interesting takeaway, I think, about what you said about DevSecOps from Kubernetes and container orchestration perspective. I'd like to quickly go back to the other 3 panelists as we are trying to wrap up this panel. If they could share with us just one main takeaway that they would like to highlight, perhaps take 30 seconds and share with us, because we covered a lot of ground here. That'd be great.
Absolutely. Let me go first in same order. I
Sure,
think
go ahead.
the one takeaway I would have is shift left. Start testing early, because when you have a lot of statistical analysis or dynamic scans, but if you do that early on in the development life cycle, it doesn't matter if you implement daily, if you have monthly or weekly, it doesn't matter, because you are getting better with the code. So definitely make sure your developers are willing and trained enough and have all the tools that they can integrate automated security testing as they develop. That's key in making sure that downstream we are building a secure application roadmap. And if I may add a smaller bullet to that, because one topic is so hard, I just want to add executive blessing is really important. So the message that you can give and communicate, to the board, to the SLT, to the management, to the teams, it's super critical that we're all aligned, so that we have that blessing to get the program started. Then we can have all the steps in order. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Jyoti. Nikhil and Val, would you like to add something very quickly? Just here.
Absolutely. So number one thing is there, what I would recommend every company, whether it's a startup or a large company, every company should look at secure development life cycle. And because the development processes has changed, you need to take a step back. And whenever you're implementing or looking to implement SDLC program, look at the people, process, and technology aspect, and go with a fresh mindset that the traditional tools are not necessarily going to cut the mustard over there. So take a step back and look at people, process, and technology in your approach for the secure software development lifecycle.
Well, I think we're on the buzzer. So I would say, like, all good things have been said and done, but I think one of the most important things that will prevail is that you need to have the executive buy-in. This is a long road. This cannot be done without the involvement. And all of us, we are talking here, we have gone journey. So make sure you get the approval from the top to make that change.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate all your wonderful perspectives. And with that, I'll hand it back to Nat to close up the session.
Yeah,
or is it
thank
Girish?
you. It's Girish. Yeah, thank you, Abhi. Hey, first of all, thank you, Jyoti, Nikhil, Ratan, and Val, and Abhi for a wonderful discussion. I think you guys bring tremendous perspectives here. So thank you so much. And then I wanted to sort of close out by saying that hope you all picked up more than one nugget through the 3 panels that we had. DevSecOps, as you saw, very important. It's serving an important need. Then AI and security. I'm personally very deeply involved in AI. It's just the way things are going on, and I'm so glad to see the amount of work AI is playing in the area of cybersecurity. And then, of course, Hyan's keynote, she did sort of look at the chaos, embrace it, and then find some order within that. I think that's very key for us to do as well. But all of us, I hope you feel two takeaways from this. Number one, we are in safe hands with all these world-class experts, toiling day and night in order to make it happen. I think great things are happening in cybersecurity, and we are safe. Number one. Number two, the whole mission of TIE is to foster entrepreneurship. So if you're an entrepreneur or a would-be entrepreneur, if you're an investor, or if you're in a large company that would buy startups, if you're in any part of that ecosystem, which I'm sure all of us here are, some way or the other, various parts of that. Just wanted to make sure that you got something to take away today, and also an ability to engage with this esteemed group of panelists. TIECon continues with closing keynote that is coming up in a few minutes. So if you can stay on with the right links through your Hua app, I would appreciate it. And again, wanted to thank everyone today, and then the whole team that put this together: Nat, Divya, Abhi, Naveen, Karthik, Sai, and of course the entire TIE team that made this happen. Thanks again, folks. Have a great Wednesday, and see you all soon.